I need to take a commercial break, said the host as she shut down the studio. The sound engineer then took over and began to play the commercials that supported the show. I've wanted to quit my job for years, said the host, feeling safer in her soundproof room and not broadcasting to the world. But you are paid too much to quit, I said, completing her thoughts. Nodding, she said, yeah, that's it. I'm not paid a lot, just enough so I won't quit and go somewhere else. I need my paycheck. My husband and I make a lot of money, but with 4 kids in school, there is no way we can do what you are talking about. Although I did not agree with her point of view, I did let her know I understood how she felt. So, what would you say to me? How do I break out? I need that paycheck. I need this job, even if it doesn't pay much. I feel I am trapped in a room, with walls that are closing in around me. What can I do? Taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I finally asked, do you remember the example I used of the baby learning to walk? Yes, I do, said the host. And once they can walk, the baby becomes a child. And once they learn to drive, they become a young adult. And that is how we learn anything in life. We learn by first having a desire for a change, we want something better. You may have enjoyed your work at one time, but now you know it is time for a change, it's time to move on, just as a baby somehow knows it is time to change, it's time to stop crawling. At some magical point in time, the baby knows when the time is right, when it's time to do something different. The baby begins by clinging to something, like a pants leg of a parent or the leg of a table. Babies wobble as they are learning to bridge the gap between crawling and walking. They do this repeatedly, and then one day they let go and fall down. The baby failed. Instead of quitting, which is what many adults would do, the baby repeats the process again and again. Then one day, the baby's mind, body, and spirit come into alignment and the baby can stand. Soon after standing, the baby learns to walk. The baby becomes a child. Then comes bicycles and then comes cars, said the host. Babies become children and children become adults. I completed the thought by saying, yes, and the same process is similar for entrepreneurship. I just happened to start at 9, failed at 9, and succeeded at 9. You can do the same if you are willing to risk going through your learning process. So you are confident in your skills as an entrepreneur? Asked the host. No, not really. I am confident in my ability to make mistakes, correct, and improve my business. I am a better entrepreneur today and I plan on getting better. But no, I am never fully confident in my skills as an entrepreneur, because I do not rest on my laurels or my past successes. I constantly put myself in situations where I am beyond my skills. I am always on edge, always tentative, always testing myself. That is the way I continually get better. And that is why you start new businesses even if you fail? Asked the host. I start new businesses even if I succeed. That is why I have so many businesses that run without me. That is my secret to great wealth. Most employees have one job. As an entrepreneur, I have multiple businesses. That's why you do not want to be self-employed or run the business. Yes, and that is why I am glad I failed at the age of 9. At the age of 9, I learned how to start businesses that ran without me. I wrote about those businesses in Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yes, I remember, said the host. I just did not get the significance of those businesses. I did not realize those tiny businesses would have such a profound impact on your life. Nodding again, I said, I found my strategy for life at the age of 9. The sound engineer then informed us the commercial break was over and it was time to continue the interview. The host turned on her microphone and said, we only have a few minutes left, so let's wrap this up. You're telling us that an entrepreneur's job is to make mistakes and an employee's job is to not make mistakes. Is that your message? Yes, it is. At least that is the way I see it. If I am not taking calculated risks, not making mistakes and growing the company, I should be fired. If my employees make too many mistakes, I might have to let them go. That is why I hire smart employees who hate making mistakes. They do their job, I do mine. That is why we say to our kids, go to school so you can get a good job, said the host. Schools are training our kids to be employees. Yes, I replied. If you do well in school, you'll probably do well in the corporate world or in government. Did you like school? Asked the host. Not really, I replied. I did not do well in school because I made too many mistakes. I was a C, D, and on several occasions, an F student. So in school, I figured out that since I was already good at making mistakes, I might as well become an expert at making mistakes. That is why I am an entrepreneur, not an employee. I am not that academically smart. No one would hire me for a high-paying job. I don't like following orders, so I'd probably never be promoted. I like changing things and doing things my way rather than doing what I am told to do. You would definitely not get a job at this radio station, said the host. I might not get a job here, but I do know how to buy this radio station and hire people smarter than me to run it for me, I added with a hint of humor in my voice. Okay, we have to wrap this up, said the host. Do you have any other examples that show that making mistakes and failing is essential to being an entrepreneur? Is there anyone else, another example besides you that can support this point of view? Oh, sure, I replied. Thomas Edison was asked to leave school because teachers complained that he was addled or scatterbrained. Later in life, he was criticized for having failed over 1,000 times before inventing his version of the electric light bulb. When asked how he felt about failing over 1,000 times, he said something to the effect of, "I did fail over 1,000 times. I believe it was 1,014 experiments that failed before. We finally succeeded. It takes at least 1,000 failures to qualify you to invent a light bulb." What does he mean it takes at least 1,000 failures to qualify you to invent the light bulb? The host asked. It means, if you or I wanted to invent a light bulb today, instead of just buying one from the store, we would probably fail at least 1,000 times before we knew how to make a light bulb. So he was labeled a scatterbrain in school and failed 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb, said the host. That means he is an inventor. How does that make him an entrepreneur? Do you know what company he founded? I asked. No, I do not. He founded General Electric, one of the most powerful companies in the world. Originally known as Edison General Electric, one of the original 12 members of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and of the original 12 only GE has survived to this day. Not bad for an addle-minded scatterbrain who failed a lot. The interview was over. Learn from your mistakes. My rich dad believed in learning from your mistakes. He did not view mistakes as bad but simply as opportunities to learn something about business and yourself. He said, mistakes are like stop signs. Mistakes say to you, hey, time to stop, take a moment, you don't know something. It's time to stop and think. Rich Dad also said, a mistake is a signal that it's time to learn something new, something you did not know before. Along that line of reasoning he also said, too many people are too lazy to think. Instead of learning something new, they think the same thoughts day in and day out. Thinking is hard work. When you are forced to think, you expand your mental capacity. When you expand your mental capacity, your wealth increases. So every time you make a mistake, stop and take the opportunity to learn something new, something you obviously need to learn. When something does not go your way, or something goes wrong, or you fail, take the time to think. Once you find the hidden lesson, you will be thankful for the mistake. If you are upset, angry, ashamed, blaming someone else for the mistake, or pretending you haven't made a mistake, you haven't been thinking hard enough. Your mental capacity hasn't expanded enough. You haven't learned the lesson. So keep thinking. Poor Dad's philosophy on mistakes. My poor dad, being an educator, had a different point of view on mistakes. To him, making a mistake also indicated you did not know something, but to him, making a mistake meant you were stupid or intellectually challenged. When my poor dad made a mistake, he often pretended he did not make one, denied making one, or blamed someone else for the mistake. He did not view making mistakes as an opportunity to learn and increase one's intellectual capacity. He did his best to avoid making mistakes. He did not view making mistakes as a good thing, as my rich dad did. Bad luck to good luck. Lesson number 2, learn how to turn bad luck into good luck, is the second lesson because of the differences I noticed between my rich dad and my poor dad when it came to making mistakes. In my opinion, it was each man's personal philosophy on the subject of mistakes that determined his ultimate success in life. His first big failure. In earlier books, I wrote about coming home from the Vietnam War and having to decide in which dad's footsteps I would follow. I was about 25 at the time and both my dads were just turning 50. At the time, my poor dad had just lost his bid as the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii. Since he ran for office against his boss, the governor, my dad was informed that he would never work in state government again. So he was unemployed and out of work at the age of 50. The problem was, all he knew was the world of education. He entered the academic world at the age of 5 and did not leave that world until the age of 50. Out of work, he had to take early retirement. He took his retirement money, entered the world of business as a reluctant entrepreneur, and purchased a big-name ice cream franchise. He purchased this big-name franchise because he thought it was a cannot-fail business. In less than 2 years the cannot-fail franchise failed and my father was once again out of work and now out of money. Blaming not learning. My poor dad was angry, depressed, upset, and blaming the franchisor as well as his partners for the failure of the business and the loss of his money. It was during this period that I understood why my rich dad stressed the importance of stopping, thinking, learning, and correcting. It was obvious from my dad's mental and emotional state of mind that he had gone through many stop signs and was blaming instead of learning. He was continuing to think with the mental capacity of an employee, not an entrepreneur. Within just a few months of opening his ice cream business, my dad knew it was in trouble. Once friends stopped coming by to buy a cone, the store was virtually empty. My dad would sit there for hours, all by himself, without customers. Instead of taking a moment to stop, think, and ask for guidance, he fired his employees to reduce costs, worked longer and harder in the business, fought with his partners, and then spent the remainder of his money by hiring an attorney and went after the franchisor. In other words, he used up his money blaming the franchisor for his problems. Out of money, the business finally closed. It was obvious that my real dad had taken bad luck and turned it into more bad luck. Instead of stopping, learning, and correcting, he could not admit that he might be making mistakes. Instead of making things better, he made matters worse. With his political campaign loss and the loss of his first and only business, he remained angry and defeated until he died, nearly 20 years later. That is why this lesson on mistakes, bad luck, and being dumb and dumber yet getting richer and richer is so important to me. Show me a happy loser. I once heard Vince Lombardi, the famous coach of the Green Bay Packers professional football team, say, "Show me a happy loser and I will show you a loser." Over the years, I have taken the time to look deeper into the multiple meanings his saying has. On the surface, Vince Lombardi's words seem to mean that people who take losing lightly are losers. I have been that happy loser many times in life, saying such things as, "Oh, it doesn't matter. Winning is not that important to me. It's how I played the game that matters." On the surface I may appear nonchalant or happy about losing, but truthfully deep down inside, I hate losing. In other words, when I pretend to be okay about losing, I am lying to myself. The more I thought about Lombardi's quotation, the more meanings came. To the surface, some of the other things he might have meant are: 1. Nobody likes to lose. Losing is not something we look forward to. 2. Losing should inspire winning. 3. Some people avoid losing at all costs because it is so painful. In my opinion, it was the third meaning that caused my poor dad's business failure. For years, he operated in a world where losing, making mistakes, and failing was to be avoided at all costs. As an employee, he was used to and wanted his steady paychecks and guaranteed benefits. To many workers, like my dad, security is far more important than opportunity. That is why so many employees, as a personal philosophy, will avoid making mistakes at all costs. One of the reasons my dad failed was simply that he had avoided making mistakes for too long. High-speed learning. In March 2005, my wife, Kim, and I signed up to take Bob Bondurant's 4-day Formula One racing school, located in Phoenix, Arizona. Don't ask us why we signed up for it. We just did simply because it sounded fun and exciting. We are not professional race car drivers and have no intention of becoming professional race car drivers. All my life, I loved movies about Grand Prix races and Formula car racing. I envied Paul Newman and his hobby of auto racing. Starting with my very first car, a 1969 Datsun 2000, I have almost always owned high-performance street cars. After the Datsun, I purchased a Corvette, several Porsches, and a Ferrari. My problem has always been the cars had more power than I had talent. That problem was one of the reasons why Kim, who also owns a very fast Porsche, and I decided once and for all to learn to drive race cars on a racetrack. From day one of the class, we realized that we had made a mistake. There were two classes. One class was for high-performance driving. This is the class we should have been in. In that class were everyday people, who simply wanted to learn to drive regular cars at high speed. The second class was titled Grand Prix driving, which is the class Kim and I were in. In this class were professional race car drivers and amateur drivers with years of racing experience. Kim and I did not realize we were in the wrong class until we noticed the first class driving high-performance Cadillacs, while we were driving high-performance Corvettes. The thought of asking for a transfer crossed our minds, but we decided hanging out with professional drivers might be a great way to learn a lot faster. But a knot formed in my stomach once we decided to stay with our class. I knew I was about to face some of my greatest fears. Kim was feeling the same. After lunch on the first day, we were racing those souped-up Corvettes. My fear had turned into terror. I was in way over my head. On the morning of the second day, the knot in my stomach was worse. My logical mind was chattering away, trying to find a way to quit gracefully. In the classroom, my instructor came up to me and kindly said, "You're driving too slowly. You need to drive much faster." At that moment I was ready to quit and I would have, except the instructor then said, "Your wife Kim is catching on. She's driving much faster than you are." Immediately, my male pride kicked in, logic went out the window, and I had no choice. If Kim was driving faster than me, I had to stay. As a side note, Kim was the only woman in our class of 12 people. She was very excited about passing men. Burn out the fear. For 3 full days, the knot in my stomach grew worse as speeds kept increasing, turns came faster, and my mind went into sensory overload with all I had to learn and do at high speeds. At lunch on the third day, I finally asked my instructor why he kept insisting I increase my speed. After all, I wanted to drive slowly so I could learn the lessons before adding speed. He smiled and said, "I want you to go fast because speed will burn that fear out of you. Your fear keeps you stuck. You get up to your fear and then back off on the throttle. Your fear is still driving the car. That is why, when you get up to that fear, I want you to go full throttle." Again, I wanted to quit. Again, I was being told I was not going fast enough. Again, I thought that the way to learn was to practice at slow speeds, not fast speeds. "Look," said Les, my instructor, "you have to trust that there is a Grand Prix driver inside you. If you don't go fast, you'll never meet the driver inside you. I want you to push yourself, push that throttle, so the driver in you comes forward and takes over the car. If I let you go slowly, the coward in you is still driving the car. There is only one way the professional driver can come out, and that is by pushing hard on the accelerator. When you go to full throttle, you have to trust that the professional race car driver in you will take over." On the fourth day, the knot in my gut was even worse and my mind was coming up with every reason why I did not have to do this course. The fourth day is when the class stops driving the Corvette and gets into Formula One open-wheeled racers. On this day we had red jumpsuits and helmets on. Being overweight, I had trouble sliding down into the car. It felt like I was sliding into a coffin. I couldn't move. Again, the coward in me almost took over. I wanted to quit. I could hear my mind saying, "You don't need to do this. You don't have anything to prove. You'll never be a race car driver. Why are you doing this? This is nuts." In less than an hour, I was happier than I have been in years. I was at home in the car. Suddenly, all 3 days of lessons, fears, and frustrations clicked and I was driving the car at full throttle. Instead of fear, it was exhilaration. The driver in me had pushed the coward aside and taken over the car. As we left the class, late that afternoon, high as kites, one of the students who was in the high-performance sedan driving course instead of the Formula One racing class we were in came over to us and said, "I love the class one was in, but I really wish I was in your class." Thanking him, I replied, "That's funny, because up until today, I was wishing I was in your class." 2 different worlds. The reason I mention the driving school is not to brag about my new driving skills. I mention it because the school is about a process very similar to an employee becoming an entrepreneur, a process of going from one world to another. One of the first lessons I learned is that what I need to do on the streets and highways is opposite to what I have to do on the racetrack. For example, on the highway, if you see a wreck directly in front of you, most people step on their brakes. In the driving school we were taught to step on the throttle. In the real world, when a car begins to skid, most people step on their brakes. In driving school we have to know when to step on the brake and when to step on the throttle. In other words, with different skids, there are different responses. Trust me, stepping on the brake is easy. Stepping on the throttle in a skid is hard. It goes against everything I know. In order to do it, I definitely needed to increase my mental and physical capacity. In the normal world of driving, most people are asked to drive at or below the speed limit. In driving school, we were taught to step on the throttle and go beyond our personal limits to speed. Speed and fear definitely increased my capacity. A great curriculum. My 4 days at the Bob Bondurant High Performance Racing School were 4 days of the steepest learning curve I have ever gone through in my life. The learning curves at the racing school were even steeper than the learning curves I went through at the Navy Flight School. Obviously, Bob Bondurant is not only a great Formula One driver, he is also a wonderful teacher. As a fellow teacher, even though terrified most of the time, I did spend a lot of time evaluating his teaching methodology. I was impressed with the curriculum in the classroom and on the track. For 4 days, he and his instructors kept us going through our fears as well as our mental and physical limitations with a high degree of safety. Once on the track, I did not have much concern for my physical well-being. The primary concern I had was my wife Kim passing me at higher speeds, which she did on several occasions. Physically I was fine, but my ego was severely bruised each time her car flew past mine. The entrepreneurial process. The process of going from street driver to racetrack driver required that I unlearn many things. In other words, the right things to do on the street will get you killed on the racetrack. Also, the smart thing to do on the street, such as slow down, is often the stupid thing to do on the racetrack. The same is true with going from employee to entrepreneur. They are two different worlds, and what is right in one world is wrong in the other. The reason I tell the story of my poor dad's transition from the world of government to the world of entrepreneurship is to illustrate this point, the point that what he did right in the world of government was wrong in the world of entrepreneurship. Since a new entrepreneur is creating something out of nothing, it is obvious that mistakes will be made. In order to succeed, a new entrepreneur needs to be committed to going through these steps as quickly as possible. 1. Start the business. 2. Fail and learn. 3. Find a mentor. 4. Fail and learn. 5. Take some classes. 6. Keep failing and learning. 7. Stop when successful. 8. Celebrate. 9. Count your money, the wins and the losses. 10. Repeat the process. The dreaded disease. In my estimation, 90% of want-to-be entrepreneurs do not get to step 1. They may have a plan, they may have created the perfect business in their head or on paper, but that dreaded disease known as analysis paralysis infects them. Instead of going forward, I have seen many want-to-be entrepreneurs design and redesign their plan. Or they find some excuse why the time or the plan is not right. Instead of taking action and failing, they work hard at trying not to fail. They enter the world of analysis paralysis. It is impossible to become an entrepreneur without starting a business. It would be like trying to learn how to ride a bicycle without a bicycle, or me wanting to learn to be a race car driver without a race car and a track. My rich dad said, the main reason to start a business is to have a business to practice on. If you do not have a bicycle to practice on, how can you learn to ride a bike? If you do not have a business to practice on, how can you learn to be an entrepreneur? Different schools of thought. At the Bondurant High Performance Driving School, the course curriculum did not focus on doing things right. The course focused on making driving mistakes at higher and higher speeds. As our ability to make mistakes and to correct them at high speeds increased, our confidence went up. On the 4th day of the course, I could make a horrible mistake at high speed, lose control of the car in a turn, regain control, get the car back on the track, get back to full throttle, and race on. If I had attempted that on the first day, I would probably be in the hospital. Once again, I mention this driving school because it reflects a contrast in different schools of thought. My poor dad came from the school of thought that focused on the avoidance of mistakes. That is why he was a good employee. My rich dad came from the school of thought that encouraged the making of mistakes. That is why he was a good entrepreneur. Dumb and Dumber. This chapter is entitled Dumb and Dumber Gets Rich and Richer as a tribute to Jim Carrey. For those of you who have ever watched a Jim Carrey movie, you may have noticed that the dumber he is on screen, the richer he becomes. The same is true with entrepreneurship. If you are a person who needs to always look good, sound smart, never make mistakes, and have all the right answers, then being an employee or a self-employed person might be a better path for you. When I first started out, I looked like the biggest clown in town. My businesses would go up and come crashing down. Soon my reputation as an entrepreneur in the business community of Honolulu was laughable. If not for my rich dad guiding me and encouraging me to learn from my mistakes and go out and make more, I might have quit my process. I found it painful to play Jim Carrey's screen characters in real life. Yet as the years went on, the mistakes were bigger but not as painful, simply because I was becoming an expert at making mistakes. Instead of running through 5 or 6 stop signs, I did stop, think, learn, correct, and expand my capacity as an entrepreneur before going on. Today I can honestly say I am richer than many of my peers, many who did well in school or had higher paying jobs early in life, simply because I was willing to be dumb and dumber for years. That's part of paying the price to succeed. Turning bad luck into good luck. When we were just entering high school, Rich Dad taught his son and me how to turn bad luck into good luck. At the time, both Mike and I were sinking fast in our sophomore year of high school because we were flunking English. Mike and I were not great writers. Instead of being upset with us, Rich Dad said, "Let this setback in school make you stronger, not weaker. If you can turn this bad experience into a good experience, you will be further ahead of your classmates who passed the course." "But we both have F's on our report cards," Mike protested. "That record travels with us all the way through college." "Yes, the grade travels with you, but so does the lesson in life. In the long run, this lesson in life can be far more important than your grades if you take this bad incident and turn it into a good incident." Mike and I were really angry with our English teacher. We were depressed and felt like failures. Looking at us, Rich Dad chuckled and said, "Your teacher is winning. You guys are losing because you're acting like losers." "What can we do?" I asked. "He's got the power. He's already flunked us and the whole school knows it." "He only has the power to flunk you," smiled Rich Dad. "You have the power to take your anger and do something even more stupid, like slash the tires on his car, which I suspect has crossed your minds, or do something good, like take your anger and do well in school, or do well in football, or in surfing. Take your anger and turn it into greatness. Then you will win. If you take your anger and slash the tires on his car, you will take a bad situation and make it worse. You'll probably spend time in jail if you do what you are thinking." The power of emotions. That day Rich Dad taught us that as humans we have 4 basic emotions. They are 1. Joy. 2. Anger. 3. Fear. 4. Love. He also explained that there were many other emotions, but these were the basic ones. Many of the other emotions were combinations of 2 or more of these basic emotions. For example, sadness is often a combination of anger, fear, and love, and occasionally joy. He then taught us that each emotion could be used in 2 basic ways, for good or for bad. For example, I could feel joy and use the joy to go out and drink heavily, which would be using the emotion of joy for a bad purpose. I could also use the emotion of joy and send thank you notes to everyone who helped me in life. The same is true with all 4 basic emotions, even love. Today, I still do not like my English teacher, yet I am grateful that he flunked me. If not for that F, I might not have studied harder to get through college and I might never have become an international best-selling author. In other words, that F at the age of 15, combined with my first business failure at the age of 9, has made me a millionaire over and over again. Best of all, not only did I learn many lessons about life and myself, I learned to turn my anger into joy, and I learned that being dumb and dumber can make me become richer and happier. And that is one of the steps in turning bad luck into good luck. As Rich Dad said, if you can turn bad luck into good luck, you will have twice the luck and be twice as lucky in love, life, health, and money. Before quitting your job. Before quitting your job, you may want to practice turning bad luck into good luck or turning any anger you might have into joy. Those skills are important skills to possess before embarking upon the journey from the world of an employee, a world of avoiding mistakes, into the world of an entrepreneur, a world of making mistakes. Later in this book we will explain how and when I decided to making mistakes, my specialty. A reason why I decided to get ahead by failing was simply that I was failing in school. Academically, I have never been that bright. Although I read a lot today, I am still a slow reader, moving my lips as I read, and when I count, I still need my fingers and toes to count my money. Although I did graduate from a great school, all through my years in school, I was always a C, D, and F student, always graduating at the bottom of my class. Sharon Lechter, who founded the Rich Dad Company with my wife and me, is the A student, a CPA, and an entrepreneur, and she will supplement the lessons in this book with the smarter approach to being an entrepreneur. In other words, she did not follow the Dumb and Dumber approach to being an entrepreneur, as I did. The businesses she founded are more successful than mine. Nonetheless, Sharon had her own lessons to learn along the way. Regardless, if you are considering being an entrepreneur or have already started your own business, I believe you will find some of these real-life lessons entertaining and even a little educational. Sharon's insights. Lesson number 2. Learn how to turn bad luck into good luck. Rich Dad said, "There are no mistakes, just learning opportunities." THEENTREPRENEUR, SJOBISTOMAKEMISTAKES. THEEMPLOYEE, SJOBISTONOTMAKEMISTAKES. I might put it a little differently. An entrepreneur cannot and will not be deterred by the fear of making a mistake. He or she will not let his or her fear of making a mistake get in the way. Nobody likes making mistakes. From my perspective, it is not an entrepreneur's goal to make a mistake. However, experimentation and making wrong choices are natural parts of being an entrepreneur. Successful entrepreneurs are not afraid to risk being wrong, and if they make a mistake they learn from it, and sometimes put it to work for them and capitalize on it. Is making a WRONGCHOICEAMISTAKE. Whether something is a mistake is a matter of perspective. The perspective of an entrepreneur is different from that of a worker-employee. To try new things, particularly things that other people think unlikely to work, is part of the essence of being an entrepreneur. Because the entrepreneur tends to follow untraveled paths, there is a much higher likelihood of missteps. Most entrepreneurs recognize that and accept it. Experimentation means trying something to see if it will work. Obviously, not all experiments will work. If it was a sure thing, it would not be an experiment. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you make a wrong choice. When someone tries an experiment that goes wrong, is it a mistake to have tried the experiment? Entrepreneurs typically do not view that as a mistake at all, but merely as experimentation, a calculated risk. Remember Robert's story about Thomas Edison. Dealing with mistakes. When entrepreneurs make a mistake, they typically do not fixate on the consequences of the mistake. They typically are not particularly concerned that making the mistake might make them look bad. The true entrepreneur focuses instead on learning from the mistake. How do you solve any problems resulting from the mistake? How do you avoid making the mistake in the future? How do you minimize the adverse consequences of the mistake if it does occur again in the future? Is there a way to capitalize on the mistake and turn it into an advantage? How do you capitalize on a mistake? I like to think in terms of turning problems into opportunities. You identify a problem and come up with a solution for it, how to avoid or minimize the consequences of the mistake. That solution may well be a valuable asset, often called intellectual property, around which a business can be built or which can be used as a tool to grow your existing business. Of course, you would want to put legal protections in place so that you have exclusive rights to that solution to the greatest extent possible. For example, let's take a trip back in time and assume that you were in the process of developing one of the first transistor radios. You found out the hard way that if you made a mistake in the way that you connected the battery to the circuit, reversed the polarity, the transistors had a tendency to go up in smoke. At that point in time, transistors were very expensive, and it was a costly mistake. But you learned from the mistake. You identify a problem, and come up with a solution, a plug with a key that prevents it from being inserted the wrong way. Assume that you are able to obtain patent protection on your solution to the problem. Do you think that you could build a business around the solution to that mistake? The ANATOMYOFAMISTAKE. There are actually two primary aspects to the fear of making a mistake: fear of the consequences of a mistake and fear of looking bad perception. We are not saying that it is wrong to consider the consequences of an action. Even entrepreneurs generally think through the potential consequences of an action. Being an entrepreneur does not mean acting irresponsibly. Being an entrepreneur does not mean that you would test out a new vehicle braking system for the very first time by running a car full speed to within 10 feet of an animal and jamming on the brakes. The difference between an entrepreneur and a worker-employee is that the entrepreneur is not paralyzed by remotely possible consequences, but will find a way to minimize likely adverse consequences. The other aspect of fear of making a mistake, a fear of looking stupid, is, well, stupid. It is not surprising that someone is afraid to make a mistake because he or she might look stupid. As we have discussed in our other books, our public schools tend to condition us to be afraid of looking stupid. As a straight A student, this was a very big issue for me. I wanted to be right and didn't want it to ever appear that I didn't know something. I even felt that asking a question would be admitting that I didn't know something. It took me nearly 20 years to break through this mental roadblock and to realize that asking questions is how we learn. I must admit that I still catch myself wanting to be right. I also recognize this same mental hurdle in many highly educated people, and it makes me feel sad for them. Being able to look stupid occasionally and ask questions freely opens up a whole new world to top students. I now call myself a recovering A student, and invite all of you other straight A students to join me. Having said that, there are situations where the entrepreneur has to be concerned with credibility. Your reputation in your profession or business community can be harmed by too many mistakes. But when people are too afraid of making a mistake, they often simply are unwilling to take any risk, and never even consider becoming an entrepreneur. And if they do start the process, they concentrate their focus so much on avoiding risk that they fall victim to analysis paralysis, as Robert described. They are so focused on trying to gather information and identify and eliminate all of the risks that they never feel comfortable actually moving forward with the business. Analysis paralysis stops them in their tracks. We are not suggesting that you move forward without regard to the consequences. You need to act responsibly and do your homework. You need to set the foundation for your business to keep it from collapsing in the future. You need to plan. As Rich Dad said, a successful business is created before there is a business. But you must also recognize the point of diminishing returns. There is a broad spectrum between moving forward blindly and falling victim to analysis paralysis. In truth, you will never be able to eliminate all the risks. At some point, you will have enough information to go forward, and additional planning is simply wasting time. Once you have identified the opportunity and the major risks, set the foundation and developed a business plan to minimize the risks, then move forward to implement the plan. Analysis paralysis is not the only obstacle to taking the first step into entrepreneurship. There is also the inertia factor. It's easy to do nothing, so that is exactly what many people do, nothing. This is particularly true if you are comfortable the way you are. There generally is some sort of perturbation that initiates one's journey into entrepreneurship, something that makes you want to change the status quo. The transition process. Let's look at the stages you might go through in transitioning from employee to entrepreneur. Stage 1. You become unhappy as an employee. Now, we are not saying that there is anything wrong with being an employee. For this world to operate, we need people who are happy being employees. The problem with being an employee is when you no longer want to be one. The Sunday night blues set in and you dread going to work on Monday morning. You may say or think the following. 1. I don't want to go to work. Besides, my job description begins with the words dead end. 2. I like my job, but I'm not getting ahead. When I look up the corporate ladder, all I see is my supervisor's rear end above me. 3. I'm not being paid what I'm worth. Regardless if I work hard or fall asleep on the job, I don't get paid any more or any less. Many of my fellow workers do not work as hard as me, yet they make the same amount of money as me. To me, this is not fair. If I work harder, I want to make more money. 4. I used to enjoy what I did but now I'm bored. I want a more challenging job but my boss says I'm not qualified. He says I need to go back to school before I can be promoted. 5. I don't want to go from job to job. Besides, it's time I worked for myself and built my own business. 6. I have too much seniority to quit. If I quit, I'll have to start at the bottom in a different company and take a cut in pay. 7. The company I work for isn't going anywhere. 8. I do all the work and my boss gets all the credit. 9. Why am I working for this guy, running his company, making him rich? He's never here, all he does is play golf. I should run my own business and make myself rich. 10. Why am I working so hard to make all my clients rich when all I get paid is an hourly rate? 11. I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own boss. 12. The writing is on the wall. They promoted someone younger than me. 13. I can't afford to leave my job or retire. I don't have enough money in savings and my 401k was wiped out in the stock market crash. If you have thoughts like these, it may be time for you to become an entrepreneur. You may want to start a part-time business while you are still employed. But the important word here is, start. Stage 2. Overcome the fear of getting started. Over the years, I have met many people who wanted to quit their jobs but were terrified of failing. Instead of quitting their jobs and getting started on their own business, they continue going to work day after day, using such excuses as 1. I'll do it tomorrow. 2. I'll do it when the perfect opportunity appears. 3. I'll do it when I have the money. 4. I'll do it when the time is right. 5. I'll do it when I have more time. 6. I'll do it when I find the right partner. 7. I'll do it when the kids are out of school. 8. I'd do it but my wife wants me to keep my job. 9. I'll wait to see if I get the next promotion. If I don't, then I'll start my own business. 10. I'll go back to school and take a few classes first. 11. What happens if I fail? 12. I'll be too embarrassed if I fail. 13. I'm not smart enough. 14. What will my friends say? Stage 3. Just start. You have made the decision to get past the fear and to start your business. You have the business plan, the product or service, and you are ready to start. Commit yourself to going through the steps Rich Dad shared with Robert as quickly as possible. 1. Start the business. 2. Fail and learn. 3. Find a mentor. 4. Fail and learn. 5. Take some classes. 6. Keep failing and learning. 7. Stop when successful. 8. Celebrate. 9. Count your money, the wins and the losses. 10. Repeat the process. You have heard the saying, getting started is half the battle. Use your fear as a motivator to succeed. Whine it. When I left public accounting, many of my friends and family were shocked and asked me, why? Why in the world would you risk leaving the fast track? To become a partner at a large international accounting firm, to do something so risky as to start a new business. I really spent a lot of time soul searching. I was 25 at the time and thought I knew everything. The conservative accountant in me asked the same question, why? However, it was the entrepreneur in me that said, don't ask yourself, why? Ask yourself, whine it. I have never regretted my decision at age 25, because I listened to the entrepreneur in me, why not? I could always get another job with an accounting firm, but I might not ever have the same opportunity to own equity in a company. As it turned out, the company I joined for ownership was a tremendous learning opportunity, and I learned a lot. Within a year I had moved on, but I have never regretted my decision to listen to the entrepreneur in my head. My big bonus was that I met my husband, Michael, through that company. When looking at new opportunities today, I still ask myself, why not? Instead of, why? So I challenge you to ask yourself, why not? Why not get started today? Oceanofpdf.com. Rich Dads. Entrepreneurial lesson number 3. Know the difference between your job and your work. Oceanofpdf.com. Chapter 3. Why work for free? Differences between job and work. Do you know the difference between your job and your work? Asked Rich Dad one day. Puzzled, I asked, aren't they the same thing? Isn't a job the same as work? Rich Dad shook his head and said, if you want to be successful in life, you need to know the difference. What's the big deal? Asked Mike as he and I shrugged our shoulders and waited for the lesson we knew was coming, whether we wanted the lesson or not. What does your dad always say to you about getting a job? Asked Rich Dad. Thinking for a moment, I replied, he says things like go to school and work hard so you can get a good job. Does he say, do your homework so you can get a good job? Yeah, I replied, he does say things like that. So what is the difference between your job and your work? Asked Rich Dad again. I don't know, I replied. It all sounds like work to me. Oh, I get what you're saying, said Mike. A job is something I get paid for. I do not get paid for work such as my homework. Work is what I do to prepare me for my job. Rich Dad nodded. That's it. That's the difference between your work and your job. You get paid for a job but you do not get paid for doing your work. Looking at me, he asked, do you get paid for doing yard work at home, or does your mom get paid for doing her housework? No, I replied, not in my family. I don't even get an allowance. Do you get paid to do your homework? Asked Rich Dad. Does your dad give you money to read books? No, I replied a little sarcastically. Are you saying that my homework is what prepares me for my job? That is what I am saying. Rich Dad smiled. When it comes to money, the more homework you do, the more money you earn on your job. People who do not do their homework make less money, regardless if they are an employee or an entrepreneur. Thinking for a long while, I finally said, so it is true that if I do not do my homework at school, I won't get a high-paying job. Yes, I would say that is true, said Rich Dad. At least, if you don't do your homework you will not become a medical doctor, accountant, or lawyer. If you are an employee, it's tough to get promoted and earn more money if you don't have a trained skill or a college degree. And if we want to be entrepreneurs, we need to do a different type of homework. I asked. Rich Dad nodded and said, and many entrepreneurs quit their job without doing their homework. That is why so many small businesses fail or struggle financially. So you're having us do our homework to become entrepreneurs. Exactly, Rich Dad said. And that is why I am not paying you. Working for me for free is doing your homework. Many employees do not understand working for free. They expect to get paid for anything they do. That is why they fail. They continue to think like employees. They want that steady paycheck. Lots of work but no jobs. In many poor parts of town, there is a lot of work to be done, but there are very few jobs, Rich Dad continued. Thinking for a moment, I finally repeated what he said. There is a lot of work but no jobs. To me it was puzzling and I needed to think more about what he said. Why is that? Asked his son Mike. Well, one reason is that we are trained in school to look for jobs. If there are no jobs, people are out of work, even if there is a lot of work to do. When a factory closes or moves overseas, it usually leaves behind a lot of unemployed employees. Rich Dad continued to explain, employees see no jobs so they do nothing. On the other hand, an entrepreneur sees a lot of opportunity. The entrepreneur knows that the jobs will come if the work is done. So they need to be retrained. They need to do their homework, I added. That's the work that needs to be done. That is some of the work, said Rich Dad. Look, the point I am making is that too many people confuse work and job. Too many people expect to get their job training for free. Even if a person has a job, too many employees expect their employers to provide them with training and pay them at the same time. They want the company to pay for their education. I asked. Being a teenager and not having worked in a big company, the idea of expecting to be paid for training was strange to me. Many people also expect the government to provide them with job training for free, added Rich Dad. And that is why you say they are poor people, said Mike. It's more than financial, it is a poor attitude toward the value of education, training, and preparing oneself to have a skill people will pay for. Rich Dad agreed. I've seen employees attend training classes keeping one eye on their watch. At quitting time, they jump up and leave the class even if the instructor has not finished the lesson. Or I've seen employees who are outside, smoking and gossiping, or drinking in the bar and watching sports on TV, or flirting with other workers, rather than attending the class the employer is paying them to attend. That is why so many people do not get ahead in life financially. Too many won't learn anything even if it is free or if they are paid to learn it. And this applies to both employees and entrepreneurs. Since I came from a family of government educators who believed in free education, I asked, would you explain a little further the relationship between work and jobs? Doctors worked for free. Sure, said Rich Dad. Medical doctors spend a lot of money and a lot of time learning to be doctors before they get paid as a medical doctor. That is one reason why they earn more money than most people. The doctors did their homework before they get paid, Mike added. Professional athletes worked for free. They certainly did, said Rich Dad. But also look at great athletes who earn a lot of money. I do not know of a single great athlete who got paid for practicing his or her sport. Most professional athletes started young, practiced longer and harder than the average athlete. Most professional athletes practiced for years, many paid for lessons, and they put in long hours, long before they got paid. They had to do their homework before they got their jobs as pros. That is why you don't pay us, I said softly. We work for you for free. Rich Dad smiled. Even the Beatles worked for free before they became world famous and rich. Like the medical doctor or professional, they paid their dues. They did their homework. They did not ask for a guaranteed record contract, a steady paycheck, and medical benefits before they began practicing. I've bought a lot of their records, said Mike. I've helped make them rich. They made themselves rich, said Rich Dad with a smile. Doing your homework applies to more than just money. It also applies to your health. Many people are unhealthy because they do not work out. They don't exercise, I said. So they have poor health. Notice the word poor, asked Rich Dad. Poor financially and poor in health. People who are lazy and lack discipline are often the people with the worst health and the worst wealth. So we need to do our homework if we want to become entrepreneurs, I summarized. That is why you boys have been working for me for free for all these years. You've been doing your homework to become entrepreneurs. If I were training you to be employees, I would be paying you by the hour. So that is why my dad, a government school teacher, got so angry when you had me work for you for free, I added. Chuckling and nodding again, Rich Dad said, your father thinks like an employee. That is why he thinks I should pay you. He does not understand working for free. He does not understand that you are receiving a priceless education. It's just not the kind of education he values. The type of education an employee needs is different from the type of education an entrepreneur requires. That is why he thinks you're cheating us, I added. I know, smiled Rich Dad. Look, years from now, you'll be a lot richer because of what I am teaching you. What you are learning is much more valuable than a small paycheck. Before you quit your job. Before quitting your job, you will need to find out how many different jobs make up a business. Rich Dad said that a person is a highly successful employee, let's say in sales, does not mean he or she will be successful in business. The reason he said this was that selling is only one of many jobs required by a business. His other point was that a struggling business is a business where a job or several jobs are not being done at all or are not being done well. He said, an entrepreneur may be working hard but only working hard at one job at a time. That is why so many self-employed business owners struggle or eventually burn out from overwork. They may be working hard but they may not be doing all the jobs a business requires. The basic jobs of a basic business. In the third of the Rich Dad series, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, Warner Books, 2000, the BI triangle is introduced. The B and I refer to the business owner and investor quadrants of the cash flow quadrant. The following is the BI triangle that Rich Dad shared with me. Rich Dad said to me, if you are going to be an entrepreneur or an investor, fully understanding the BI triangle is essential to your success. As a teenager,